Pyramids, portals, and endless dunes of sand. These are the things you will find in the world of myth. Hi, I'm Ross Watson, the lead designer of Myth Tales of Legend.
And I'm J.M. DeFogie, the lead writer of Myth Tales of Legend.
And today we're going to be talking to you about the setting. We're going to delve into one of the four kingdoms we haven't talked about too much, which is, go ahead, JM.
We're going to talk about Kanis, and I'm really excited about this. It's if I were going to start a game in Myth, when I start my campaign in Myth, it'll probably be either in Kanis or Blackwall, but those are like my top two areas.
Well, it's interesting. Every time we cover an area, we are like, this is cool.
This is it. Yeah, exactly. Which I feel like is a good sign that we're excited about all of this.
So Kanis is a little unusual in that it's got a sea. Mm-hmm. It's got a coastline, but it also has a massive desert sort of wasteland in the east.
Yeah, the fields of light.
So Kanis is sort of in between those two things, mm-hmm. Which doesn't hurt because it has a very strong Egyptian feel. Mm-hmm. And I think that actually, that kind of geography is kind of perfect for that stuff.
I agree.
Now, Kanis is also kind of our Byzantine region in that intrigue and scheming. This is they're renowned for that stuff.
Right.
More twisted than a vizier's career plan. It's
That's
probably
right.
a proverb somewhere in the Four Kingdoms.
Yeah, obviously, if you've been following along, there's a lot of political intrigue in the Riverlands, and you may have some like guild contests in Blackwall. But if you really want like the political intrigue, the setting for that, we really kind of like Kanis has all of these cities that have existed far longer, at least in their own minds, than anywhere else in the Four Kingdoms. They're far enough away from Haldor and Farron Rock that they haven't had as many overt battles against the darkness, so they have a longer, they haven't had to do a bunch of rebuilding, so their bureaucracies, if you will, as Ross said, are very Byzantine. They are labyrinths of like political machinations and dark cults infiltrating, and so nothing is as it seems. Whereas, in Blackwall, it may be a very straightforward sort of thing. In Kanis, there's always going to be layers and always ulterior motives that may not readily be apparent as, oh, this is something about the light or this is something about the darkness. It may just be, well, this is something about the vizier, and, thanks for advancing this plot of mine.
Now, in terms of creatures, the Okians are very common in this region.
Yeah.
As is the World Eater, which is the massive worm that travels through the fields of light, leaving little portals behind.
I love this little bit. Like, there's enough. Sometimes I feel like with modern fantasy, we get very sanitized world building where everything has a place and it has to make sense. And then we get things like the World Eater, this giant worm that burrows through the desert, but also between the boundaries between dimensions, and leaves just this eclectic wreckage through its path, and it doesn't really fit anywhere, and it's perfect. I love this weird outlier.
And the people of Kanis too. We've got your city. You've got your city dwellers, which are primarily where the scheming and the Byzantine political intrigue stuff comes from. But you also have a large portion of them are caravaneers that travel between city to city. You got merchants and things of that nature. Mm-hmm. You also have some desert tribes, some of whom follow the World Eater on its little journey, sort of going and seeing what happens to pop out of those little portals it leaves behind. Right. You might even call them rifts if you wanted to.
You could call them rifts. You may bless the coming and the going of the World Eater. There's a lot of references here that we could make, but that also brings up an interesting industry in Kanis, is that you have these desert nomads, and then you have groups of treasure hunters who brave the fields of light to bring back the weird stuff that falls out of these portals between worlds. Some of them go out to defend Kanis from creatures that may come out of these portals, and some of them are like, hey, there's always something good there, right? If something comes through and we can kill it, we can bring it back to the cities and sell these rare artifacts.
So one of the things that sets Kanis apart also is that the other three kingdoms, they all suffered, lots of disasters, and they suffered from monster attacks, and there's like ruins and stuff everywhere in the other three kingdoms because of the history of the region. Kanis still suffered, but it suffered in a much subtler way. It was more about corruption, and it was more about manipulation. So a lot of the stuff, I mean, I would imagine you go to Kanis and it's like going to Europe from the US. You're like, that thing there is way older than anything in my entire country.
Right. There's a bar in England that is apparently where Richard set off to the Crusades. So it's, 1,100 years old.
Yeah, I've been there.
Huh. Yeah, right? Like, cool. Yeah, we don't have it, 250 years, 300 years on this side. And you're like, oh, yeah, it's where the history is. That's kind of like Kanis, right? It's where the history is.
Yeah. So that's not to say that there aren't ruins covered by the sands. That's not to say that there aren't things that were lost or destroyed, but it's less common. And more likely this is going to be the place you go to find your crumbling scrolls dating back. Like if you're on a quest for historical stuff, Kanis is a really interesting place to go for that. There's probably a vizier who probably has a collection of pottery and scrolls and record like tablets dating back to maybe even the age of breaking.
So before. One of the things that I was noodling about is if the World Eater is as massive as it's portrayed in the World of Myth book, like maybe some of these ruins that you find out covered by the sands aren't native to the four kingdoms, right? The World Eater opened a portal and took like several blocks from this other like temple in some realm that may have been forgotten and dropped it here. And so when you're traveling in the Fields of Light, you can't always trust that what you find is of this world. And I like that sort of mystery, and that sort of, it allows GMs to, like, you could introduce an entire storyline of something not from the Four Kingdoms and have the group trace it back to where it entered in the Fields of Light.
Let's start with the Fields of Light. The Fields of Light is this desert. It is a vast desert. It occupies the southeast region, and it basically forms a border of the known world. Like the Four Kingdoms and their little area in Huhanasi, right? That's all like the known world. But whatever lies on the other side of the Fields of Light is still kind of, here be dragons. It's legendary. Yeah. And some Kanis people, like tales and legends, they talk about like there's kingdoms and realms beyond that border, but nobody's come from there for hundreds of years, for at least an age. Yeah, let's put it that way.
It's sort of the right after the collapse of Rome, the rumors that and legends that we had of, say, China before the Silk Road was open, right? We know there's something over there, and maybe at one point we actually had trade with it, but now this natural barrier is too much for us to overcome.
Right. And, like any desert, exposure, dehydration, these are issues that you'll run into in the Fields of Light. But you also have the Okians who live out there, and the unholy, because those guys can just survive anywhere. So
yeah, they don't really care. Yeah, one is the Okians, this is their home, so they are sort of perfectly adapted to living in the Fields of Light, and the unholy just don't care, right? Like, that's one of the advantages of undeath. You don't have to worry about exposure.
So you could run into some unholy, you could run into some Okians, you could run into a caravan, you could run into a desert tribe, you could run into a portal leading to another world, because those are common. I don't want to say common. They're the most common here that they are anywhere, but even here it's still a pretty rare occurrence.
Right. And the portals are in the wake of the World Eater, so there's always a danger in trying to find portals, because you're basically looking for the biggest thing in the Fields of Light and then trying not to get its attention.
Now, some of these portals are actually they heal. They close quickly. So I imagine there's some that are still open that are you could just like sort of run across naturally. But if you see one that's slowly closing, you're behind the World Eater for sure. Also, there's what you call spice wells. Why don't you? He who controls the spice. Tell us about that, David.
So we have so this all sort of came out of really when we started digging into the apprentice and the charring that they suffered. And so we have this on this map, there's this city, and I guess we can talk about Ark right now. Ark is this city that sits deep within the Fields of Light. And so we're trying to come up with a reason, like, what possible reason could this giant fortified city be in the middle of the desert? It's sort of off the beaten path, so it doesn't make sense that it's kind of like a caravan route. And so with Kanis stating that they are the home of the oldest schools of apprenticeship, we came up with this idea that within the Field of Light, the reason that they're out there is there's this presence of this material called Arcan, and apprentices can rub it into their skin, and it removes the effects of the charring. It basically makes them look, so you can't just tell an apprentice by looking at it, which, as you may imagine, is a huge boon to them. Now,
it's like magic sunscreen.
It's like magic sunscreen, but it's also highly addictive and does extend the life of the apprentices. So it's become this whole industry in Kanis. And so Ark is this city that sits in the Fields of Light that sends hunters out into the desert to kind of gather this Arcan and bring it back. And it is more valuable than water in the desert and gold in the courts. It allows the apprentices and the viziers of Kanis to extend their lives and their powers and go about the city sort of hidden, right? You don't see the red charring effect. So yeah, that's what the spice wells are.
But these things sort of well up naturally in the desert, and that's why you send out guys to find them. So lastly, before we leave the Fields of Light, let's tell our viewers, what would an encounter with the World Eater actually look like? I mean, what are we talking about here?
Yeah. After those characters die, no. So in my mind, the World Eater is a force of nature. It is not a monster to defeat, right? It is a run and hide and then deal with whatever's in its wake. Like, in my mind, it is you have to find a way to save lives in the face of the World Eater, and then you can deal with whatever comes out of the wake. So it would be like if, in our world, if tsunamis, as they retreated, left like deep ones on the coast. So you have to survive the tsunami, and then you know that there's something coming after it. It kind of heralds the arrival of the deep ones. So especially if it starts getting close to caravans or cities, heroes are called upon to, I don't know, get its attention and move it away from the target, or get people to safety and then kind of help them survive what comes after.
Well, I kind of in my head have that image of the Desert Storm from Fury Road, where it's just like, huge fiery winds, and then there's like this big worm in the silhouette in the distance, and you're like, yeah, no, we're not going that way.
Yeah, let's run away.
All right, so now let's talk about Ark. Ark is a fortress, and it sits in the Fields of Light, deep within the Fields of Light. It is a thriving world because there's a lot of money that's spent there. Well-armed caravans keep the city supplied, and yeah, it's a place to go find all that cool stuff that you get out of the desert or out of the portals. So the Bazaar of the Bazaar will be at Ark, where you can find those kinds of things. Plus, this is where Arkan is refined. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell us about Ark. Like, what does it look like? What's it about?
So it really, like, the heart of Ark, which we call the heart, is this great fortress that it's got grand walls and domed roofs, and is like 90% of the city is this fortress that just keeps getting built on as cities, as the city expands. So there are people who live in Ark who have never seen the sun. They've just lived in this redoubt, and we've kind of said that because it's so vital to Kanis, that like it is at the, I don't want to call it, like, we'll call it the bleeding edge of the resources that Kanis can, like, they want this city to stand and to survive. So it's enclosed, it's lit by magical flame, it's kept cool by arcane means. It is sort of the gem on the breast of Kanis, kind of shining in the middle of the fields of light. So coming here, it should feel almost alien to all of everywhere else that the heroes have been. Like, this is maybe what the Age of Legends would have been like for everyone. But it's this remnant in Kanis where they're saying, this is so important that we're going to be so much money and goods are coming out of this place that we're going to pour it back in there and keep it safe.
Okay, so what makes the heart in Ark different from the heart in Blackwall?
Well, that's a good question, and maybe I need to rename it. But
I think we need to revisit that nomenclature a little bit.
I mean, they are far enough away that you have this. You could have two things named the same thing, but I do think you're right. We should probably change that a bit. But it is, whereas the heart of Blackwall is kind of like the commercial center, right? Kind of the clockwork heart that kind of beats in the foundries and everything. This is more of the heart in the fact that it is the lifeblood of the city. It is actually, like I said, 90% of the city is this giant domed fortress that legends say can even resist a world eater. Like, if the world eater came through, the fortress would still stand. No one's ever tested that.
This is basically Myth's Jericho.
It's Myth's Jericho. It's Myth's Minas Tirith, if you will. Right. This is Troy. This is the unbreakable fortress.
Got it. Okay.
Beware of world eaters bearing gifts.
And they have a caravanserai, of course, which is because they this is where they get supplies. They don't have farms or anything. I imagine the caravans that go to and from Ark are probably some of the most well defended and largest in all of the region.
Yeah, especially because it's such a trek to get to Ark that you really kind of have to. No small merchant is going to be able to afford everything that they need to get to Ark. So small merchants band together to form larger caravans. The really successful ones funded by other cities. That kind of takes us through where these places come from.
Now, some of the people in Ark are interesting. We have this guy called Sufi Chiquito. And this dude he operates a monastery where he also teaches the way of the blade. And I'm kind of curious, like, is this a different flavor of people in Monk maybe than we've seen before? Are they like teaching, scimitars and falchions instead of?
I totally like that idea, right? Like maybe the Sufi has said, hey, like, I came here, I set this monastery up, but hey, that's a cool sword, and if I'm going to get people here, like, let's kind of start adapting the local traditions in here. So I do like maybe it's a little bit more dervish than like Kensai sort of sword styles. Exactly.
That's what I was thinking. I think it's got to have a slightly different flavor here, which is kind of neat and interesting. Because it allows for a slightly different aesthetic if you want to play a people or a monk
from this
in
area.
The world of myth. Yeah, well, because this is one of those places where they are slightly different. And Chiquito herself, she hires people sometimes to go out into the desert and deal with some threat that she sees or senses or believes is out there.
Yeah, due to her meditation, people kind of believe that she has this sort of supernatural ability to kind of sense portals opening near Ark, and so she'll hire people to head out there. And then we have Harab of Riverthorn, who is this. Oh,
well, just really quick before we go on to Rob, does that mean that Chiquito probably has a collection of gear that's probably very esoteric and weird?
Oh yeah,
and unusual from all these portals and things? You know, you walk in and she's got like an "I Love New York" T-shirt on.
That's right.
Okay, maybe not, but
yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like there's strange things. Like if you want to talk about like, you know, Mindy's strange things, like that's where you go to her place and see all the weirdness.
I like that. And then maybe she's the one who can give players those unique and unusual rewards that don't really have a place somewhere else in Myth.
Yeah. Now let's talk. I'm sorry. Let's talk about Harab of Riverthorn. Riverthorn, of course, is one of the locations in the Three Rivers area, which we've talked about before. So this guy's far from home.
He is, and like I wanted something that definitely linked back to kind of the other three kingdoms. So this is sort of Harab. He does these very profitable caravans from Ark back to the Riverlands. And so
suspiciously profitable.
That is true. His wagons always
seems
leave.
To know,
yeah.
He always seems to know exactly what's going to be needed where he's going.
Right. And he always trades. He is the reason that this Arcan is now available in the other three kingdoms, because he always seems to get the best deals and nobody really understands why. But if your heroes need to get to Ark, there's a good chance that Harab will hire them on as guards. I feel that a good caravan run would make an interesting set of Myth adventures, kind of starting in Riverthorn and then working your way down and then working your way back. That could be a fun series of adventures, right? We're going to pay you as long as the caravan gets back here in 6 months or whatever the loop time is.
Right. Now, JM, of course, has written some really interesting little bits into all of these sections, and he's got a bit called the Heart of Darkness, where he talks about like, here's the ways that the darkness has infiltrated each of these areas. I don't want to give away the one for Ark. I really don't. Ark's one is pretty good, especially given some of the things we've just talked about. Let's just say that there is some pretty interesting things going on in the background of Ark, like that place in particular. I think we discussed this also when we talked about Three Rivers. There was some really good, juicy Heart of Darkness stuff there we just didn't get into. But I think any good GM will find something good to do here. So speaking of that, JM, if you were the GM,
yes,
and you were running a game that involved Ark and the Fields of Light, what would you do?
Oh, I think I would send the players to Ark sort of maybe mid-campaign where we've established some issue in the other kingdoms, and it comes to their attention that the only way to kind of deal with it is to go to Ark and find one of these portals, because what they need isn't from the four kingdoms. And I love the idea of building up the start of this game with all of the familiar, and then say, to protect this, you have to now go deal with the odd. Go to Ark, find the Sufi, she'll guide you to the portal you need, and bring this thing back. And give them just a taste of how weird it could be. Because there's a lot of great places of weirdness and wonder in the four kingdoms, and I feel like Ark and the Fields of Light are one of those. What about you, Ross? What would you do?
I think so. My idea is to have an adventure where we go to Farron Rock and we, deal with all of the stuff, learn of its history and all the things, and kind of get a good idea of what Farron Rock is. And then I'd like to take him out here to Ark and talk about this place again. It's the Fortress of Jericho. And then I would start to lay some groundwork. I'd be like, why is it that Farron Rock is been attacked and Ark has not? You have this big ass fort. It is clearly as strong, or could be as strong. Why is this being ignored? Why is this being just sort of set out over here? And I think I would try to lay some groundwork to make the idea that maybe the darkness is like, hey, what if I had my own fortress? What what if I could have a Farron Rock, and what if it was this? Like, I think that might be the place I would go.
Oh, I like that a lot. The Siege of Ark coming to a campaign near you.
Well, I think I would try. I mean, my first idea is to really start like laying out some books and legends, and let the characters sort of slowly discover that the guy who built it in the first place was a bit twisted. Like it may be like down to the foundations. Ark was made to be a citadel of the darkness at some point.
What's the line from Ghostbusters? He was either a demented genius or an occult fanatic.
Right? Yeah. This is that building,
That's
right?
right, yeah.
What do you think?
I like it. I could really get behind that idea. I would love that as a player, to kind of play through that and discover that this thing that we thought was a bastion of light has been this long-term play by the darkness to get all of the mortal species to build it its own Farron Rock.
And you could go so far as to even say like, and in Ark, the spice has there's reasons why that's addictive, and I don't know. It's probably going way too far. Like I'm just taking.
Oh no, but for a home campaign, this is the kind of stuff that we definitely want Myth GMs to come up with and run with.
So anyway, those are some of my thoughts on it, and I think that's going to take us through at least the first part of Kanis. We have a couple more things to talk about, so we'll come back and talk to you about that in part 2.
In 2 weeks, right?
2 weeks.
Awesome.
We're shifting to a slightly different schedule. In the meantime, you guys, hey, thanks so much for being fans of our show. Please be sure to leave a comment in the descriptions. We'd love to read and find out what you guys think. And we, of course, have plenty of other material on the channel for you to watch. Check out the one on Fading Sun's particularly good. What's that one?
Heretical Musings.
Heretical Musings. I love that one.
Great. Yeah.
And there's, of course, some really great streaming shows. You can even see me in JM's game, The Four Horsemen, where I play Lady Salvo in the Torg game, which is super awesome. And of course, there is a Fading Suns game that JM is also running. And various specials. There's a Halloween special you should check out for sure.
Definitely check out the B team was spectacular.
So those are the things that you'll find on the Ulysses International channel. So thanks again. JM, you have anything you want to add before we?
Not really. Just as always, as I say at the end of the show, stay safe and stay healthy. And
Okay. So until next time,
keep telling stories.